Look, we've all been there, standing in a room, staring at someone, thinking to ourselves, how in the world did this person make it this far? Now, I'm not here to tear anybody down, but sometimes it's crystal clear when someone's making decisions that just don't add up. You see, wisdom doesn't come from age. It comes from choices. So, buckle up, because today we're talking about the 6 signs of a stupid person. And these ain't just your everyday little mistakes. These are the kind of blunders that can keep you from ever truly living a successful life. Let's dive in and let's get real. You ready? You set? Refusing to learn from mistakes is a surefire sign of a person stuck in a cycle of ignorance. We all make mistakes. That's part of being human. But the difference between those who grow and those who stagnate is whether they take the time to reflect and learn. When someone refuses to acknowledge their errors, they deny themselves the opportunity to improve. It's almost as if they're choosing to remain blind to their own flaws. This behavior often stems from a fear of being wrong or a bruised ego. Instead of confronting their mistakes head on, they deflect, deny, or even blame external factors for their failures. They'll say, it wasn't my fault, or I didn't have the right tools, without ever examining their own role in the situation. By avoiding accountability, they miss the critical lesson that mistakes carry with them: growth. When you refuse to learn from your mistakes, you're not just hindering your own progress. You're also damaging your relationships with others. People around you can see when you don't own up to your actions, and that lack of responsibility breeds mistrust. Eventually, they'll start to distance themselves, and you'll find yourself isolated, left to repeat the same errors without the support of those who can help you improve. In the long run, this refusal to learn becomes a self-imposed barrier. It's as though you're locking yourself in a room and throwing away the key. With each mistake you refuse to acknowledge, you're further distancing yourself from the opportunity to evolve, adapt, and move forward. And as time passes, you'll find that the longer you deny your mistakes, the harder it becomes to recognize just how much potential you've wasted. Blaming others for their failures is a hallmark of immaturity and lack of accountability. Instead of looking inward to understand what went wrong, this person constantly points the finger at external circumstances, other people, or even bad luck. It's a pattern of avoiding responsibility for their own actions and decisions, which ultimately keeps them trapped in a victim mentality. When someone blames others, they refuse to acknowledge their role in the outcome, and as a result, they miss out on the growth that comes from taking ownership of their mistakes. This mindset also creates a toxic dynamic in relationships, whether personal or professional. When someone consistently deflects blame, it can breed resentment and frustration. People around them begin to feel like they are unfairly targeted or held accountable for something that wasn't their fault. Trust erodes, and collaboration becomes difficult because the person refuses to take part in shared responsibility. At a deeper level, blaming others can become an escape from self-awareness. It's much easier to point fingers than to ask hard questions about one's own choices. But by doing so, a person limits their potential for change. They remain trapped in a loop where nothing ever improves because they're always looking outside themselves for answers, never inside. In the end, the inability to take responsibility for one's failures not only stunts personal growth, but also sabotages the trust and respect needed to build meaningful connections with others. Ignoring constructive criticism is a clear indicator of someone unwilling to grow or improve. Constructive criticism isn't an attack. It's a gift, a chance for someone to get a fresh perspective on their actions, decisions, or behaviors. When a person refuses to accept feedback, they close themselves off to the possibility of learning. They may get defensive, dismiss the feedback, or even take it personally, interpreting it as a reflection of their worth rather than a tool for self-improvement. This resistance to constructive criticism often stems from an inflated sense of self or deep insecurity. When someone believes they know everything or are afraid of feeling inadequate, they reject any suggestion that might challenge their worldview. The irony is that the more someone rejects valuable feedback, the more they stagnate, while others around them continue to grow and develop. It's a way of ensuring that they remain in a state of complacency, avoiding the discomfort that comes with facing their weaknesses. In a professional or personal setting, this behavior creates friction. Colleagues, friends, or mentors who offer feedback will eventually stop, see no value in trying to help someone who isn't willing to listen or change. Over time, this rejection of feedback can become a self-imposed barrier to success. The person may wonder why they're stuck in the same place, but the answer lies in their refusal to evolve. Ultimately, ignoring constructive criticism is a refusal to be better. It's an unwillingness to face reality, to look at oneself objectively, and to embrace the discomfort that comes with growth. The longer this pattern persists, the harder it becomes to break free from the cycle of stagnation. Constantly seeking validation is a sign of someone who is externally driven, relying on others to define their worth instead of cultivating a strong sense of self. These individuals often look to external approval, whether from friends, family, or social media, to feel good about themselves. They may fish for compliments, obsess over how others perceive them, or measure their success based on the number of likes or comments they receive. This external validation becomes a crutch, and without it, they struggle to find any sense of fulfillment or confidence. The problem with constantly seeking validation is that it places your sense of self-worth in the hands of others, which is inherently unstable. One moment, you may feel on top of the world because of the praise you've received. The next, you're deflated and insecure because of a lack of recognition. This constant emotional roller coaster prevents them from developing internal. When a person's confidence is tied to what others think of them, they risk losing their sense of self when the external feedback isn't as positive as they expect. Additionally, constantly seeking validation can be exhausting for those around them. People may feel like they're being manipulated or burdened with the task of constantly reassuring and complimenting someone who never seems to be satisfied. Over time, this can erode relationships, as others become frustrated with the constant need for affirmation. Ultimately, someone who seeks constant validation is not operating from a place of self-assurance. They are tethered to the opinions of others, leaving them vulnerable to disappointment and dissatisfaction. Without a solid internal foundation, they'll continue to look outward for something they should be cultivating within themselves. Living in denial of reality is a sign of someone avoiding uncomfortable truths. Instead of facing the facts of a situation, they choose to ignore, distort, or outright reject what's actually happening. This may look like refusing to acknowledge problems in a relationship, ignoring personal flaws, or pretending everything is fine when it's clearly not. It's easier to live in a bubble of denial than to confront difficult or painful realities. However, this avoidance only postpones growth and prevents them from making necessary changes. Denial often manifests as wishful thinking or blind optimism. The person might say, it'll work itself out, or this is just a phase, without considering the consequences of ignoring the problem at hand. In many cases, denial is a defense mechanism, protecting the individual from feelings of discomfort, shame, or fear. But while it may provide temporary relief, it only delays the inevitable. Problems don't go away just because we ignore them. They grow more complex and harder to solve as time passes. Living in denial also limits self-awareness. A person in denial can't see their own shortcomings or the truth of a situation, making it impossible for them to take the necessary steps to improve. They're stuck in a false narrative, unable to adapt or grow because they refuse to acknowledge what's really happening around them. As a result, they remain stagnant, unable to move forward in their personal or professional life. In the long run, living in denial leads to regret. The longer someone avoids the truth, the more likely they are to look back and realize they wasted valuable time refusing to face reality. Ultimately, denial is a trap that keeps them from the growth and change they desperately need. Making impulsive, unthoughtful decisions, is a hallmark of someone who acts without considering the long-term consequences of their actions. These individuals often leap before they look, driven by emotion or a desire for instant gratification rather than thoughtful deliberation. Whether it's a rash financial decision, an ill-considered relationship choice, or a hasty career move, the lack of foresight can lead to regret and undesirable outcomes. Impulsive decision makers tend to prioritize short-term rewards over long-term benefits, driven by the immediate satisfaction of acting without delay. While spontaneity can sometimes be a positive trait, in most cases, acting on impulse without weighing the risks leads to mistakes that could have been avoided with a little more patience or thought. The consequences of these decisions often accumulate over time, creating a ripple effect that affects not just the individual, but those around them. It's the inversion. What's worse, impulsive decision makers often repeat the same cycle. Without the ability to pause and reflect, they make similar mistakes again and again, learning nothing from their past missteps. Their inability to consider the broader picture or slow down to think things through leaves them constantly in a state of crisis, trying to fix the fallout from their unthought. This pattern also undermines trust. People around them start to question their judgment and reliability. If someone is known for making reckless choices without considering the impact, it becomes harder for others to rely on them. Over time, the impulsive decision maker finds themselves isolated, left to deal with the consequences of their hastiness alone. And as their life unravels, they might wonder why things aren't going as planned, unaware that their impulsivity is the root cause of their problems. Surrounding themselves with yes men is a clear sign of someone who avoids challenge and seeks only affirmation rather than growth. Yes men are people who agree with everything they say, regardless of the truth or merit of their ideas. This creates an echo chamber where the individual is never confronted with differing perspectives, constructive criticism, or reality. They become accustomed to hearing what they want to hear, reinforcing their beliefs and behaviors without any regard for improvement or self-awareness. The problem with having yes men around is that it breeds stagnation. Without anyone offering honest feedback, the person is never pushed to think critically or develop new insights. Their decisions go unchecked, and their growth is stunted because they are surrounded by people who fear conflict or simply want to stay in their good graces. The lack of real, honest dialogue prevents them from seeing their own flaws, making it nearly impossible to evolve or improve. Furthermore, this dynamic creates a culture of complacency. People who surround themselves with yes men often do so because they lack the confidence or emotional maturity to handle dissenting opinions. They may be afraid of being challenged, of being told they're wrong, or of experiencing discomfort. But by avoiding this discomfort, they lose the very opportunity to grow. Real progress requires the willingness to be uncomfortable, to hear things that may be hard to accept, and to learn from those moments. In the long run, the person who relies on yes men finds themselves isolated from genuine, constructive relationships. They miss out on meaningful feedback, honest connections, and the personal growth that comes from engaging with diverse perspectives. Instead, they remain trapped in a bubble, unaware of the limitations they've created for themselves. Avoiding responsibility for their actions is a key characteristic of someone who refuses to take accountability for their choices. This person often shifts blame onto others, circumstances, or external factors whenever things go wrong, rather than acknowledging their own role in the outcome. It's a defense mechanism that protects their ego, but it ultimately prevents them from learning and growing. The longer they avoid responsibility, the more they stay stuck in a pattern of unproductive behavior, never fully owning their mistakes or recognizing their potential for improvement. When someone avoids responsibility, they undermine trust with others. People around them begin to notice that they never take the initiative to fix problems or make things right. Instead, they point fingers or ignore the issue altogether. Over time, this erodes relationships, as others grow frustrated with the lack of accountability. Whether in a personal relationship or a professional environment, being someone who can't be relied on to take responsibility for their actions creates an atmosphere of frustration, confusion, and mistrust. Avoiding responsibility also means avoiding growth. Responsibility forces you to confront uncomfortable truths, to face your shortcomings, and to take the necessary steps to make amends or change behavior. Without this, personal development is impossible. The person who refuses to take responsibility remains stuck in their mistakes, unable to break free from the patterns that keep them from progressing. In the end, the refusal to accept responsibility leads to a life of excuses and blame. The individual never learns to adapt, improve, or take control of their future. Instead, they stay trapped in a cycle of avoidance, while the opportunities for growth slip through their fingers. Lack of self-awareness is the critical trait of someone who fails to recognize their own behaviors, motives, or impact on others. People with low self-awareness often don't see how their actions, words, or decisions affect the world around them. They may be unaware of their emotional triggers, their strengths and weaknesses, or how their behavior comes across to others. This blindness to themselves prevents growth, as they are unable to identify areas that need improvement or recognize patterns that could be holding them back. A lack of self-awareness also means a person is unlikely to reflect on past experiences or learn from them. They may repeat the same mistakes, unable to recognize the behavior that led to undesirable outcomes in the past. In relationships, this can cause significant strain, as others may feel unheard or misunderstood. If someone is unaware of how their actions affect others, they may unintentionally alienate those around them, creating tension or conflict without even realizing it. This inability to step outside oneself and objectively assess one's actions also makes it difficult to adapt. People with low self-awareness often refuse to acknowledge their flaws or blind spots, and as a result, they fail to evolve. They remain stuck in unhealthy habits or toxic behaviors because they don't see the need to change. Without self-awareness, growth becomes an uphill battle, and the person becomes increasingly disconnected from the opportunities to improve. In the end, lack of self-awareness is a barrier to true understanding, both of oneself and of the world around them. It keeps individuals from making meaningful changes, improving their relationships, and becoming the best versions of themselves. Being closed-minded and unwilling to grow is one of the most limiting traits a person can have. When someone is closed-minded, they are unwilling to consider new ideas, perspectives, or information. They cling to their own beliefs and values, often dismissing anything that challenges or questions them. This rigid mindset prevents growth because it shuts down the possibility of learning from others or adapting to new situations. It's as if they've put themselves in a box and sealed it shut, refusing to let anything or anyone outside their narrow view of the world in. A closed-minded person often resists change, even when it's clear that growth or adaptation is necessary. They prefer the comfort of the familiar, no matter how outdated or ineffective it might be, rather than exploring new ways of thinking or being. This lack of openness can be particularly damaging in personal and professional settings. In relationships, it can cause conflict or misunderstanding, as others feel shut out or invalidated. In a professional environment, a closed-minded attitude can prevent collaboration, innovation, and progress. Being unwilling to grow goes hand in hand with being closed-minded. Growth requires openness, vulnerability, and the willingness to challenge yourself. When a person refuses to grow, they become stagnant, held back by their own limitations. They may see the world in black and white terms, rejecting the nuance and complexity that is often essential to solving problems or finding solutions. In the long run, the closed-minded person remains stuck in their own bubble, unable to reach their full potential. They miss opportunities for learning, personal development, and connection with others. And the more they resist growth, the more they trap themselves in a cycle of ignorance and missed possibility. So there you have it, the 6 signs of a stupid person. These are the habits and behaviors that keep us trapped in cycles of stagnation, frustration, and missed opportunities. It's not about being dumb in the traditional sense. It's about the choices we make that prevent us from growing, from learning, and from refusing to learn from mistakes, blaming others, ignoring feedback, constantly seeking validation, living in denial, making impulsive decisions. These are all ways we limit ourselves. Surrounding ourselves with yes men, avoiding responsibility, lacking self-awareness, and being closed-minded. These are the ways we stay stuck, unable to break free and reach our full potential. But here's the good news. It's never too late to change. You don't have to stay in that place. Recognizing these signs in yourself is the first step toward breaking free from them. Accountability, self-awareness, open-mindedness, these are the keys to personal growth. And while it's tough to face these truths, it's the only way to move forward, to grow, to be better. So, if you see these signs in yourself, take a deep breath, look yourself in the mirror and decide, am I willing to stop being stupid, stop living in my own limitations, and start making better choices? Because, trust me, the moment you do, everything changes. The power to break free and grow is always within you. It's all up to you to decide when you're ready to embrace it.